Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody, to all of you who are joining us today. You are in the right place. We'll just give it a couple of more minutes for all attendees, registrants to join us, and then we'll kick off with our presentations. All right, we'll kick off. Well, very well welcome to all of you once again. Welcome to today's webinar on financing and scaling net zero carbon and resilient buildings, hosted by the WRI Ross Center for Sustainable Cities. My name is Roxana Slavcheva. I lead the Global Built Environment Program at the World Resources Institute, and I'm privileged to be your host and your moderator today. We will dive into the critical steps needed to drive market transformation for buildings that are not only net zero carbon, but also resilient to climate impacts. We'll also explore the policy pathways, the financing innovations, practical examples from cities leading this agenda. But before we do that, a bit of important housekeeping. We'll hear from three esteemed panelists who bring unique perspectives into the discussion from the public sector, multilateral finance institution, and a national lender. They will share their perspectives within the first hour, and we hope to be able to dedicate the second part of our webinar to a discussion. So we'd welcome your questions in the Q&A box. Please save them for there. At those using this feature, we'll answer as many as we have time today. We'll record this call, may make the recording publicly available after today as well. As a moderator of today's session, I'm also representing the Women in Business Coalition's All In for Net Zero Built Environment program. All In, as we call it for short, is a global initiative in partnership with the coalition, with the World Green Building Council, two local green building councils, SUMA in Mexico and IGBC in India, and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And the initiative is aimed at accelerating the transition to net zero emissions and climate resilient building. You can learn more through the link that is provided in this slide. And we encourage you to explore our resources and engage with the growing community, starting with our deep dive work in Mexico and India. Through the All In initiative, we're working with city governments to develop comprehensive city action plans for net zero carbon and resilient buildings. And we're currently engaged with 4 cities across 2 countries, Mexico and India, with private sector engagement also integrated throughout the process. We're fortunate today to have a key representative of one of those cities with us as a speaker. So through the All In initiative, we ensure that the policies, incentives, market opportunities for net zero carbon and resilient buildings are aligned, and we're building momentum from the ground up. Our key objectives of this initiative are to drive deep decarbonization with enhanced resilience across the sector through multi-level governance. So you see here the national roadmaps development, but also the city action plans for whole life cycle decarbonization. Also to foster multi-stakeholder collaboration, uniting the public, the private, the finance, civil society actors, and to galvanize action for global advocacy for decarbonized buildings. And of course, to provide the tools such as a compendium of recommended business models, financial instruments, policy incentives, and grouping these to equip our sector representatives with the appropriate tools to advance the transition and resilience. I'm honored and extremely pleased to open this webinar with these remarks of how business and financing mechanisms can evolve to meet the needs of the sector for the future. But before we dive into it, let's ground ourselves in some context. We must recognize that Buildings are still responsible for over a third, nearly 40% of global energy-related carbon emissions, and that makes them a critical sector for achieving global climate goals. They're also vulnerable to numerous climate risks, which will continue to be exacerbated from flooding to heat waves and stress and severe storms and fires. So the challenge remains. The need to build more will keep rising as a response to population growth all around the world. And the average age of the building stock is close to 100 years in some geographies. So addressing emissions and resilience in the built environment is not optional, it's essential for meeting our climate and development goals as a whole. And yet, despite this risk of locking in decades of high emissions, the built environment still has the opportunity to transform itself into one that is more energy efficient, resilient, and sustainable. The transition from a conventional to a more climate-conscious approach in the buildings and construction sector must be done quickly and on a scalable basis, and this is what we're here to discuss today. So we start with our definition. Achieving net zero carbon emissions for buildings over the entire life cycle is what we're here to talk about, including emissions from materials, constructions, also the operations and the end of life, to prioritize efficiency, renewable energy, and low carbon materials. But these buildings, these net zero carbon and resilient buildings, also go beyond just reducing emissions. They integrate all of these components that we talked about in passive design and resilient measures as well for healthy and effective well-being improvements for the occupants. So to enable the opportunity, both business and the finance mechanisms need to be adaptable. They can support this economy-wide decarbonization with the potential to unlock large-scale mitigation and adaptation measures, both for new and retrofit buildings in emerging economies. We know that the case for these buildings is clear, but we know that also the reality of the market is that we still face significant barriers that slow progress. These barriers exist across all sectors, and they require coordinated actions to be overcome. So on the public side, we often see gaps in national or subnational policies, fragmented governance, limited technical capacity to implement net zero carbon and resilient building standards. On the private sector side, we have barriers such as supply chain limitations, lack of market incentives, in some cases, insufficient awareness of technical expertise to deliver the high-performance buildings that we need, as well as some high upfront costs to electrification and to addressing embodied carbon in the materials. And across the board, including the third sector, academia as well, we face data gaps, inconsistent standards, limited collaboration, and all of this combined, of course, contributes to a slowdown in market transformation. But there is good news. These barriers also represent opportunities. With specific actions that we've highlighted, some of those here, we can build the enabling environment to unlock the finance, to drive the partnerships, to deal with these high perceived costs, for example, and address the returns that are needed to mainstream and scale these buildings. And we emphasize four interconnected pillars that are essential to the adoption and scaling of NZCRBs. The commitment and collaboration, the supportive policy frameworks, both tested and innovating financial instruments, and resilient building models. Having looked into these barriers and also identifying the lack of scaling of decarbonization currently in the sector, seeing that this is a product of a highly fragmented policy environment, inconsistent incentives, some competing priorities, and a disproportionate business model, for example, to address the scale of the problem. We also lack certain financing mechanisms. There are yet combinations of instruments and policy incentives that seem to be working well. And here we propose a combination of these prioritized by each stakeholder group within the time frame that we have suggested. This is not an exhaustive list. It is for illustrative purposes and an opportunity to bring together all of these aspects, each of these actors, to address a critical piece of the puzzle. We welcome questions and feedback from the audience on these reflections, as we won't have time to delve into them in detail, and we can ensure we have the opportunity to hear from real-world examples shared by our esteemed panelists. So without further ado, it is with great pleasure that I welcome our speakers. We've organized the session around these three speakers and the core building blocks that are essential to enabling market transformation for net zero carbon and resilient buildings. Each speaker will address one of these building blocks based on their expertise and practical experience. First, we'll hear from Shri Jahangir, Secretary of the Thiruvananthapuram Municipal Corporation, who will cover how progressive urban policies in Thiruvananthapuram are enabling building decarbonization and the role of municipal leadership in advancing building decarbonization at subnational scale. We'll hear also from Atif Syed of the International Finance Corporation, the IFC, on the evolving landscape of green and climate finance for buildings. Atif will discuss how instruments like sustainability-linked finance, resilience standards, and frameworks can advance certification and help scale investment. And finally, all the way from Mexico, we'll hear from Patricia Mijares, who will walk us through an especially successful business models highlighting incentives, return on investment, the business case in a nutshell for scaling net zero carbon and resilient buildings in Mexico. She will share about developers and investors approaching the building decarbonization from a commercial perspective, delivering tangible business benefits. So together, these three building blocks, policy and regulation, finance, and market incentives, will form the foundation for scaling these buildings. And with that, let's hear first from Shri Jahangir to understand how one city is leading by example. Shri Jahangir, thank you for joining us. Shri Jahangir has been a secretary for Thiruvananthapuram Municipal Corporation for over a year, but has also been working for the government for more than a decade. Before working for TMC, he worked for the Kerala State Poverty Eradication Mission and also as municipal secretary for various municipalities in Kerala. He has extensive experience across various levels of government and a deep understanding of the challenges and opportunities associated with building sector decarbonization in Kerala and also in, of course, Thiruvananthapuram city. Please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Rexona. Good evening, everyone. Good morning. The outset, I am so thankful to the WRI and all the organizers giving me this opportunity to interact with you and giving my presentation on what policy and regulatory activities we are undergoing here in connection with the net zero carbon resilient buildings initiative. Can you move, please? Yeah. So I'm giving you a brief about the city. This is Kerala, southernmost state of India, and Trivandrum is the capital of Kerala state. One of the progressive state in India in all respect, education, human resources, and all respect, like green, clean, etc. And Trivandrum is the largest city corporation in Kerala. In all size as well as in finance, whatever mode, population-wise also. It's the first city corporation in Kerala formed in the year 1920, and it elevated to a city corporation in the year 1940. And a population of 10 plus lakhs, I mean, a million population, a million plus city, and now it is almost 13 lakhs. And that urban transformation is very tremendous in Trivandrum. Because of its various reasons, that it is having a human resource capital of Kerala with an IT. It's also called IT capital of Kerala because we have a techno park. Is one of the first techno park in India formed under government sector, working almost 70,000 people, and we have international port also recently opened, transshipment port, and we are having all the prospecting side of tourism also. And our motto is to always available the city is safe, resilient, inclusive, and sustainable. And always we are looking for bringing the city more clean, green, and resilient. Kika, please, yeah. And a few efforts which leads to the decarbonization efforts of Trivandrum Corporation is transforming the entire conventional street lights to almost 0.1 million street lights to solar, which saves energy and sustainability. And the retrofitting of LED in rooftops also, we are saving a huge quantity, and various initiatives like solar drinking water kiosk, then open air gyms, bed shelters, etc. We are supporting decarbonization efforts and green cover also. And recently we have launched a bunch of buses, 115 electric buses for city drive. So people are using highly that public transport. They are depending totally nowadays the public transport system. And for our employees also, we are providing e-bikes for their day-to-day activities, official activities, and our sanitation efforts also. We are providing the e-mobility systems. Then we are other systems like for public, we are providing subsidies for getting installing solar panels on rooftops, and other budgetary supports also we are providing. This year we are almost done with a green budget, a climate budget, and probably by this month end or next month we will publish it. And because of various actions we are undergoing for the last few years, we have been selected this year, got the UN Habitat Shanghai Global Award for Sustainable Development 2024, and almost progressive awards from the side of Government of India and the state government also we have received. Please. And the area of the total corporation is 214 square kilometer, and almost 50% of the area we are providing for residential purpose, and rest we are given for other commercial and other uses, residential, industrial and other purposes, educational and other industrial purposes. And almost we have 5 lakhs buildings. Majority are residential buildings, and maybe 1/5 or more than 1/5 is only commercial buildings. This is a majority of the population are depending basically job-oriented activities, and government servants are also very high. And energy conservation, what we observed that residential category is the highest side, where almost 70% they are using for residential category, but commercial is now very less. But nowadays it is increasing because of the presence of port and other industrial activities. And efficiency side, actually we have just recently launched a program called a Solar City project, that we have introduced 17 plus megawatt of rooftop solar panels for all the government buildings, 527 major buildings like hospitals, schools, and government offices, etc., generating 17 plus megawatt electricity. And we have issued an incentive, a SOAP for green called green incentive, providing 20% tax SOAPs for those who are complying few efforts to decarbonization and carbon resilient buildings. Please. And this is a statutory support we are providing based on Kerala Municipal Building Rules, that is KMBR. It was enacted in the year 2019, so which provide various statutory efforts, progressive efforts, to ensure that decarbonization efforts are happening at field level also. So, for example, I'm quoting a few, like if the connected load of the building is 100 kilowatt or above, or that area of the building is more than 500 square square area, then they have to comply Kerala State Energy Conservation Building Code, which support like installation of solar panels, then energy conservation, then rainwater harvesting, then waste management, so many forestry, green cover, like various efforts they have to undertake. Then only we can provide the occupancy certificate of the building, which promotes highly forcefully and statutorily they are compelled to comply various efforts to ensure decarbonization efforts of the state and the local body. And we have a state designated agency also for checking, and they are providing the certificates based on which only we are providing tax benefits to the local bodies. And we are asking all the high-rise buildings or high-capacity buildings to provide at least 50% of the rooftop for solar installation, and their water usage, their other kind of energy consumption is to be checked and monitored at various levels. Even households also, if their area is more than 400 m square, we are insisting them to provide solar systems. Yeah, please. And other few, I already said that these are the efforts from our side to implement, like through a mandatory process to get their building certificate. Before that, they have to ensure that energy conservation and water conservation activities has to be complied, and systems has to be installed in various efforts which we are following. And we are always insisting, and we have provisions in the municipal rules to provide natural lights, and thereby reducing the use of electricity and other ventilation systems to get the feeling that it is they are eco-friendly building. And for all the buildings, if it is a residential building or whatever building, if the area is more than 450 m square area, they have to ensure that the tree cover, at least one tree cover per 450 m square area. This we are giving some relaxation, that once they get the occupancy certificate, they can plant the trees, or they can raise the trees in 1 year time. We are providing some flexibility. Next. So these are the efforts nowadays we are taking, and I'm concluding and awaiting for your questions, if any. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shri Jagamir. This was a very comprehensive presentation of the current policy and regulatory environment. I would like to thank you for sharing your vision, for highlighting the quick wins that we have now, highlighted here in terms of incentivizing solar-powered roofs in Thiruvananthapuram city. But I wanted to also give the opportunity now for our next speaker to show us the potential for scale and to create opportunities to bridge some of those great policies and incentives, and identify the pathway for finance to bridge the gaps that exist. So Mr. Atif Sayed, as I mentioned, works for the IFC, the private sector arm of the World Bank. Thank you for joining us. Atif leads the Green Building Program for South Asia, where he supports the development of the green building policies, industry standards, and private sector investment opportunities. He'll tell us about the rollout of the 2 IFC standards for buildings and the type of investment support channels that are available for municipalities as well as countries, and which have drawn investment in the past, over 2 billion in green buildings in all of South Asia. So over to you, Atif.
Thank you, Roxana, and thanks for WRI for this opportunity. So as was described, I work for the private sector arm of the World Bank Group, which World Bank Group is basically a global entity, a development organization. If you go to the next slide, please. And our primary goal is on reducing poverty and increasing shared prosperity. And one of the challenges that we see across the world is buildings, especially housing. There's a huge gap for housing, but we also see that the climate change, which for which buildings are one of the biggest contributors, is disproportionately going to affect and is already affecting some of these developing countries where we are primarily working. So our mandate given to us, to my team, was to make sure that the buildings that are being constructed around the world, especially in the developing world, are being built in a way where the impact on the climate is minimized. And also lately, in the last 3-4 years, we've also started to look at the impact that climate change is happening on buildings. So basically both, how can we reduce the impact on climate change from buildings, and how can we reduce the impact of climate change on buildings once that change starts to happen. The next slide, please. So one of the challenges that we saw while starting this work was, first was the knowledge, the awareness, and the skill set of the professionals, the financiers, the building owners, the government, on some of these challenges that we see. The policies was again one of the things that, as was highlighted in the previous presentation, in some cases they've got like really good policies that can catalyze better adoption, mainstreaming of green buildings. But we looked at some of those policy development as well. And incremental cost is another challenge. And the challenge that I'll be focusing on more in this presentation is the finance to these buildings. Primarily, I'm going to talk about buildings, although we do work with cities as well. But I'll talk more about individual buildings or portfolio of buildings. So next slide, please. Now, when we talk about finance, there could be three questions. How much finance is needed? Who provides such finance right now? And I'm talking about not just regular plain vanilla climate finance, building finance. I'm talking about climate or green finance, finance that kind of fuels or can support the development of more efficient buildings, efficient, green, resilient, net zero buildings. And the last question is, what exactly is the criteria for getting access to that climate finance for buildings? I'll try to address all three questions in the presentation today. Next slide, please. A few years ago, we conducted a study globally. What I'm presenting here is just the numbers for South Asia, but if you search for Climate Investment Opportunities, IFC, you'll find a report for all major countries in the world, developing countries in the world. And we looked at climate finance opportunities across multiple sectors. And we found that the building sector, the green building sector, has the biggest opportunity, the biggest investment opportunity. Now, this is something that for an end user, it doesn't really matter as much, but for an investor, it can be quite an attractive thing. So we're trying to attract other investors to start investing in green buildings as well. And that was the whole purpose of this report, identifying what that investment opportunity was. Next slide, please. Now, many investors around the world have already started investing in green and climate buildings. So you can see there are some DFIs, some international investors, and then there are some local investors, like in the bottom row, we see some Indian banks and a bank from Indonesia and a few other places as well. So all of these are providing their criteria may be slightly different, but maybe varying a little bit, but we'll talk about the criteria also in a bit. Now let's go to the next slide where we look at the different flavors of sustainable or climate finance. There are two broad categories. One is what we can say, follow the money. Basically, we are saying we give this money to a project owner, and they have to use that money for making their project more efficient, more resilient. And they have to show evidence to the investor that they've done that. That's the follow the money. The follow the impact model is saying that we give money to a project, and this is typically for portfolios. We don't necessarily tell them what to use that money for, but we say for using this money, you have to show significant impact in certain sustainability linked KPIs for your entire portfolio. And this is what we call a sustainability linked loan or a bond. This is something that we have increasingly started to use. And we feel for a net zero scenario, this is the way to go. For a regular follow the money model, there are green loans and bonds. There are different kinds of metrics that can be followed. But for sustainability linked bonds, which is relatively new in the market, there are only a few metrics that I'll talk about briefly. Next slide, please. So in terms of green bonds, we've been doing this for many years, since 2010, or more than $12.5 billion that has been issued in green bonds. Some of it has gone for buildings. Some of it has gone in other sectors as well. So this is a fairly common model now, especially with large corporations. Next slide, please. But we've also invested directly with building owners, building developers. And as you can see, our volumes have been growing over the past few years. On an average per year, IFC is now investing $1.3 billion in green buildings across the world. And there are some examples you can see, like there is a REIT in Mexico at the top, and then there is an affordable housing project again in Mexico. Then there is a bank, because sometimes we invest with banks as well, local financial institutions, so that they can on lend to either to developers who are building green buildings or to buyers of green buildings, so like green mortgages. And similarly, we've done this investment in Indonesia with OCBC and ISP, where the sustainability linked bond was used for green buildings, green housing specifically. Next slide, please. Now, in India, where I am sitting and where I'm taking the responsibility of, we've invested more than $2 billion in the last few years. And you can see a list of some of those reputable or commonly known projects that we have worked with. But the good news is it's not just IFC. We have partnered with several other investors who've adopted our standards and have started to invest in those green buildings as well, as you can see in that gray box there. Next slide, please. Now, this typically so far has been talking about plain vanilla green building finance. But we see a lot of portfolios around the world who have started to proclaim some zero carbon or net zero energy targets. Some of these names are some of the largest real estate owners in the world, and they've all set some targets. So now the challenge has been how do we promote them? How do we encourage them? How do we finance them in this path towards decarbonization? Because we've also seen cases where the company has made a proclamation, but they don't really know how to get there. So next, please, next slide. And this is where the sustainability linked finance that we talked about earlier really comes into play. So it is a forward-looking instrument where we are looking at the expected performance of a building, and we also have a reward, meaning the commercial terms of the financing. In most cases, it's the interest rate. The interest rate of the finance is linked to the performance of the building stock, meaning the overall portfolio. It could be something like overall energy use across all the buildings in the portfolio. It could be greenhouse gas emissions, or it could be some of the other metrics that we'll talk about. Next slide, please. So these are some of the metrics or the KPIs that we commonly see in a sustainability linked finance. The one that you see at the top are the ones that are the ones in red are the ones that we typically associate with buildings. Energy efficiency obviously is the most commonly used one. So I'll show one example later on one of the building portfolios where we've done this. Next slide, please. So just digging deep into what that finance looks like. So we set a baseline. When we start working with a portfolio, we say, okay, where are you at right now? How much energy is your entire portfolio using? And then we set a target for decarbonization, which may be, let's say, 2030, 2040. And there is a trajectory from where they are now till that date. And we set these intermediate targets, which might be every 3 to 4 years. If they meet those targets in terms of energy reduction, then they get a small discount in the interest rate. If they miss the target, there may be a premium that they have to pay. And these numbers, these discounts or premiums are not very big, maybe 2.5 basis point up to 10 basis points, but they're enough to drive some of these companies to make a big change. And as I said earlier, if this is new, only about 5% of the total loans and bonds being issued in the market are going for a sustainability linked finance. But I see this as a growing segment, a growing tool for mainstreaming decarbonization as well as resilience in buildings. Next, please. Now, this is an illustration of the same thing that I was just talking about. So number one that in the chart is the base case. We establish the base case. And then at the right, we see a net zero target by 2050 in this case. So there is a clear line from now till that point of time. And then we set some intermediate targets. If they achieve those targets, then they get those rewards and benefits. Next, please. Now, in terms of how much can be financed and how much can be considered as climate, for new buildings, the entire investment that is going in a building is considered as climate finance. In a retrofit, only the cost of the retrofit is typically considered as climate finance. Only the cost of the refurbishment. If you're doing this kind of portfolio wide target, then the entire investment in the building stock could be counted as climate finance. Next, please. Now, this is one example of a recent investment that IFC done in India. So close to about $100 million were invested in this REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust, called Mindspace, where we set targets on GHG emissions, and it has already started to kind of document. They have started to document their energy efficiency measures and the performance that is as a result of that is being improved. And in the next 2 years or so, they will report for the first time, and that will determine how those interest rates will be adjusted. Next, please. So we've been talking about the various types of green building finance. Typically, we talk about mitigation. We talk about how much operational energy can be reduced. But the first point, which is construction of buildings, that's also coming into play now more often, which is embodied carbon. Or in other words, you can say the manufacturing energy of all the construction materials used in the building. There are specific targets for our finance. When we do green building finance, we have developed a system called EDGE, which looks at point number 1 and point number 2 as well. Now, that there is also realization that climate has already started to change and our buildings are being impacted, then that risk is only going to increase in many parts of the world. So if we can finance buildings to reduce that risk, that is also considered under our definition of climate finance. So you can call it adaptation finance or transition finance or climate resilience finance. That's all being considered now, and we've already got some examples of that. Next, please. Now, the challenge has been definition. What exactly is that green? And we'll talk about the definition of resilience also. But to establish a definition of green, we looked at some of the existing standards and taxonomies. Now you see there are like International Capital Markets Association, they've got a criteria. Climate Bonds Initiative has one. The European taxonomy has one. And the Indian taxonomy, which is under development, is also developing a similar definition. So what we've done is gone through those. And in the next slide, we've developed a standard that is almost universal across all these major standards. There are 3 parts of the standard. One is that there has to be an independent third-party verification. You self-proclaiming that I just say that it is green is not enough. Somebody, third party, has to verify. And that too after after construction as well. Then there has to be a quantified improvement in certain metrics. And we typically use a 20% as a minimum standard. 20% in energy is the most commonly used standard. And then there has to be impact reporting. The project owner should be able to tell how much energy they've reduced, how much water, how much GHG emission they've reduced. Next slide, please. So for green buildings, that's the definition we typically use, and this works across multiple rating systems as well. So LEED and BREEAM and our own EDGE system roughly follows this standard that they provide 20% as the minimum saving. But if you're looking at net zero energy, then we've pushed the envelope a little bit and we said net zero energy buildings have to have at least a 40% reduction in their energy consumption. And then the remaining can come from solar or renewable, which means that we don't allow a building to just have a huge solar panel or connect to a solar farm and say we are net zero. It has to be a combination of energy efficiency and renewable energy to qualify. Next slide, please. So this is our definition. 20% gets you the EDGE certification, which is the minimum standard, 20% savings in energy consumption, water consumption, and embodied carbon of materials. 40% gets you an EDGE advanced, which is the kind of the foundation stone for zero carbon. And zero carbon, you have to show at least 1 years of actual building data, consumption data, to show that you are able to generate enough renewable energy or purchase renewable energy to offset all your energy needs in the building. So that's kind of roughly the definition that we follow. And we've got several zero carbon buildings that have been certified, including one in Chennai, which is our largest building in a large IT park by Tata Realty. Next, please. Now let's talk about resilience, which is the other aspect, the other perspective. Resilience is basically trying to figure out what is the risk to buildings, the physical risk, physical damage risk from various climate and natural disasters that might happen at a specific location. So we've developed a system called Building Resilience Index, where anybody could go. It's a free online tool where anybody could go to this website, put in their location and their project description. What kind of a structure is it? How it will be used? What are the energy, water systems, etc. And it will tell you what is the possibility of damage, physical damage, and operational discontinuity from various climate disasters that may be applicable to that specific site. And then once you figured out what is the current situation, then it allows you to manage that risk. It allows you to figure out what can be done to reduce that risk. So it gives you several options of like structural changes, or you install solar energy, or you do raise the plinth to avoid flooding, etc. Gives you very specific suggestions. And once you do those, once you incorporate those suggestions, you can again evaluate the building and get an updated rating. And finally, you can disclose this rating to external parties like insurance companies, like buyers, like tenants, and sometimes maybe even the government to get some benefits, some advantage. Next, please. Now, these are some of the risks that we look at. There are wind-related risk, water-related risk, fire, and geoseismic risks. And what we've just added recently is heat stress, excessive heat stress that we've seen in many parts of the world in the recent few years. And we look at the physical integrity risk and the operational continuity risk. Next slide, please. We look at all these building types. So it could be regular buildings, or it could be infrastructure like ports and industries and warehouses and universities, and give that rating. Next slide, please. This is what the rating really looks like. Now, it's a letter grade rating. NR means it is not resilient, and the definition of the criteria of not resilient is it is likely to have more than 50% of probable maximum loss. Probable maximum loss is basically the replacement cost of the building, of the parts of the building, if they get damaged. So if there is a chance that 50% of the initial capital cost will have to be put in again if such a disaster happens, then it is not resilient. 30 to 50% is B, and 10 to 30 is A. And if it is less than 15, it is AA, double A. And the plus on the outside says this is operational continuity, which means that even if your building doesn't get damaged, but the infrastructure around the building, let's say the roads or the electricity supply or the water supply, gets affected, which affects your operations. If you're a hospital, you cannot operate anymore. If you're a school, you cannot teach anymore. Then that is the operational continuity we look at as well. Next, please. So I'll just show a very quick glimpse of what the system is like. So if you go to resilience-index.org, you can sign up and evaluate your building. Next slide, please. It shows a very simple map where you can identify your location. And at the right, it tells you for that location what are the applicable risks. And then it goes to the next screen where you describe your building, the size, the location, the structural system, and the energy, water systems, etc., and then gives you the final rating. Next slide, please. So this is one example of a project that utilized this BRI, Building Resilience Index. It's a housing development in the Philippines where they got an A+ rating. And this is one where we actually invested as well. So IFC's actually put in some investment because they were going for resilience. And in India right now, we are actually working on a large REIT, a real estate investment trust by Brookfield, where we are also including this Building Resilience Index evaluation as well. So they will be evaluating all their existing IT buildings, like software companies' offices across the country, and using that for the rating. So my last slide is just one more example, and then I'll close. So this is one of the largest REITs. And again, as you can see, they did very well. It's very difficult to actually get a AA rating, but this did exceptionally well, and they were AA across the board. So I'll stop there. So this is the criteria we've been using, and we are happy to discuss more and invest and look at opportunities for investment wherever needed. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Atif. This was a very thorough presentation. You walked us through the scale of the challenge to begin with. You also explained the mechanisms that are needed, from the knowledge and the skills, which is something that WRI works quite closely with decision makers on, the policies that we also heard from TMC earlier. And then you gave us a really rich list of tools and guidance. So thank you for that. And of course, you showcase the importance of multi-partnership that is needed in order to advance all of these areas combined. So I think that will very nicely segue into Patricia's talked right now on the return on investment and the business case for being able to scale these net zero carbon and resilient buildings. I'd like to introduce, last but not least, Patricia, who joining us today as an expert on sustainable urban development, housing, climate finance. She has over 14 years of experience working across Latin America, Europe, and Africa. And in her previous role, she was a deputy director at Sociedad Hipotecaria Federal, SHF, which is Mexico's housing development bank. And Patricia led the Ecocasa program there, which is the largest sustainable housing portfolio for low-income populations in Latin America. So again, we're seeing that inclusivity and affordability angle through Ecocasa's work. She has also worked as consultant, including introducing the Swiss Minergie standard to Mexico and advising on energy efficient housing policy with all kinds of local municipalities contributing to net zero building strategies and urban regeneration initiatives as well. So welcome, Patricia, over to you.
Thank you, Roxana. Yeah, perfect. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. So we can go to the next slides. I will tell you more about the experience of Mexico in the sustainable building sector. If we go to the next slide, please. So first of all, I wanted to provide you the local context of the country and why the sustainable building is not something new. So first, it's important to consider that Mexico is one of the most populated countries, where our main climate zones are warm and temperate. So the energy efficiency plays a key role not only for the contribution of the CO2 emissions, it's also for the use of cooling that there is in mainly of the about the 60% of the regions. So this has been incorporated since the National Housing Policy since 2009, where the government included in the policy, as well as promote different programs that include subsidies that really scale and increase the number of sustainable buildings. Those subsidies prioritize those low income or social housing that include sustainable measures, as well as in the previous administration from 2021 to 2024, even that the policy was mainly focused for attend those vulnerable population and self-construction was fully aligned to the UN right to adequate housing. And even that the sustainability was not a specific criteria that was focused, was in general included, as well as the resilience of the buildings. And recently this year, the current administration also has as a target to build 1 million new homes that will be mainly for the vulnerable population, and even that the specific criteria is currently under discussion, is expected that will be including some sustainable measures. And it's also important to mention that even this previous administration and the current one is not only including the sustainable as a main focus. There are current programs, there are previous programs that still are active as Ecocasa that I will talk later. This was also the success of this has been because the regulatory framework includes some of this. So since 2011, there is 2 mandatory codes that are mainly based on energy efficiency for cooling and the envelope of the building. That is for residential as well as for commercial buildings. That is also together with some mandatory codes for specific materials and systems related with lighting and also the isolation of the buildings. This has been complemented by voluntary codes where are mainly related with sustainability that includes some passive measures as well as mainly the environmental impact of the building construction. So that includes some resilience, some socio-demographic aspects, as well as the urbanization aspects, or where the specific building can be located or where can be a hazard. No? So those codes, even the mandatory that should be obligated to be pursued for address for all the different constructions, as well as the voluntary, have some challenges in the implementation that I will talk also later, but that has been also provided a good framework. An additional thing is this green finance. So it's something that has been led by the Ministry of Finance in Mexico. Since 2022 was released the Mexican Sustainable Taxonomy. As my colleague presented, this is a framework currently voluntary, where set what means to be green or means sustainable in Mexico and avoiding the greenwashing. So establish the specific criteria for different sectors. In the case of building, set what means this energy efficiency demand that needs to be the maximum, as well as the CO2 emissions reflected for according the type of building, if it's house, if it's commercial, and even the characteristic of that building, and according the climate zone. That has been a very successful, because even that is still voluntary and was just recently approved, there are now some commercial banks that have developed green mortgages as well as green development loans for the developers. That for those homes that are, or for those buildings that are certified with energy efficiency standards, they can access to some mortgages. Also, something important, and that is a good continuation of the previous talk, is that there is also a scale number of thematic bonds that are related with green bonds, so those sustainable linked bonds, as well as the sustainable bonds that are for these developers for homes, as well as for these real estate trust investment, where the number in only the last 4 years has been increasing. There are more than 10 bonds issued to finance sustainable buildings. So it's something that has been very attractive for the market, that is completely new, didn't exist before. And that has been a result that around the 1.6% of the total country housing stock includes some sustainable measures. Even that is not a specific standard, includes some of the measures that we are talking about 500,000 homes. And that has been mainly driven by the government initiatives that started from 2009 until 2019, where there exist those subsidies. However, there are still the market has been already driving some of the current supply for implement these measures, no? And we're expected that now that the commercial banks are also involved with this taxonomy and with this interest, the number of not only homes and also for buildings will increase in the following years. Also in the side of the commercial buildings, it's important to notice that Mexico ranks in the 6th of the list of the 10 more countries with more LEED certifications in the world. So it's a very important, and there's a lot of appetite, mainly for the commercial sector, to make it LEED or EDGE including, no, or other standards. If we go to the next slide, please. So now talking about Ecocasa and the different portfolio that Sociedad Hipotecaria Federal offers. So as mentioned, Sociedad Hipotecaria is the Mexican Housing Development Bank. So the main goal is to provide access to the market. The portfolio, the sustainable portfolio, has been mainly financed by international funding from different governments and different international organizations. What was provided to CIF is that we receive different grants as well as different loans with a preferential interest rate that was transferred to the financial intermediary, that they transfer at the same time to developers who have access to lower interest rate or subsidies when their project was certified with a specific standard required. That was what was the result of this is that we have an increasing volume of households that has had access to low social income sustainable homes. So what are those standards? The one that the lead program is Ecocasa, that is the only one is still under operation, that was certified by the Climate Bond Initiative, that allows to issue a green bond for Mexico based on Ecocasa standard, and has a main purpose to build new homes that can reach a CO2 emissions from 20 to 30%, depending of the zone where they are located, the climate zone, as well as the specific characteristic of the house. There is not only related with energy efficiency, also there are included some criteria regarding the urbanization, so where is located the home, as well as carbon emissions that embodied in the materials, and the water efficiency. So those that has a highest performance, they can have a higher benefit. So how it works is that the developer bring the project with some of the sustainable measures included, and there is an optimization analysis inside of Sociedad Hipotecaria, where the team compare what is the most cost-efficient measure to include in the program, and in contrast with this benefit of the interest rate that can compensate the additional costs. There exists in one moment another program that was live, that was a passive house model. For those that are not familiar, a passive house was the first in Latin America, and it's a house that inside the home can be in average 21 degrees, and even that outside can be -0 or above 40. So for those regions of Mexico where the climate is very extreme with warm temperatures, was very successful. However, here the benefit was subsidy because how was funded, and however were different challenges in the implementation that I can briefly mention later. And the latest program was NAMA, that is a very similar program of Ecocasa, with the difference that was also a subsidy rather than the lower interest rate. So if we go to the next one, please. So how works this financial scheme? So Sociedad Hipotecaria get this loan for a lower interest rate that we offer. So for those developers that they can have a traditional funding rate, if they get the standard of Ecocasa with the different criteria that is required, they have a difference of the rate difference, a rate difference between a traditional funding versus a preferential rate. And that difference is what is the offset incremental cost of the energy efficiency measures. It's estimated that those measures are, those rate difference are between $100 to $750. That was also a similar of the subsidies that we're providing with NAMA. So that is the cost of the energy efficiency measure for a social house. So that means that a developer can offer to the market the house with a similar price of a conventional home, but one that is efficiency. So that makes really a difference in the market. So it was part of the success of Ecocasa that has been recognized worldwide with different awards of how we can really offer a massive program for social population and vulnerable population that is energy efficiency. Up to date, there are more than 70,000 homes built with the Ecocasa standard and the different and the other programs. The main benefits for the user are the comfort that they have in the house, the savings that they have for the cost of the reduction of the cost of energy efficiency and water, as well as they have a high quality house there. For the developers was that they can offer a similar product, a product with a similar price, but really with a higher quality and sustainability in there. That increased the number of sales that they can have. Also, they can get more knowledge about the technical capabilities and the know-how. During all the process, this optimization of the resources was part of the technical assistance circles that is provided by Sociedad Hipotecaria. And we go to the next one. So I will end here. So what has been the main challenge? And this is also very important to replicate. So the main thing that I always mention is that it doesn't matter if we have all this compensation of cost if we don't have this buyer behavior and knowledge change. So something that we saw in some of the live program of the Passive House or even in Ecocasa is that the buyers sometimes, even that they have the budget allowed, they prefer to buy a bigger kitchen or a closet or a hall rather than a sustainable home, because they don't know what means a sustainable house. No, they don't know what means to be 21 degrees in your house, or they don't believe that that will be possible. Also, something that happens is that sometimes even that we're providing manuals, but the developer was one of the rules for them to have is that they knew what they were living, or even happens very often for those that commercial buildings where the people that is going to work, they don't know what is the kind of characteristic that the building has. So some problems that can happen is that the electricity system change because they connect things that are not energy efficiency or that are over saturate the electricity system. No. Also, we have some situations where the solar heater was never used or even was sold because they didn't knew how to use it, or they paint the house with a different color because they knew that was also useful, or change the windows. So there is very important not only to give the knowledge, also to create this behavior of, I will mention that we need to go more to see what is the design of our house. And first thing, the sustainable and net zero homes doesn't need to be ugly, can be very, very nice and amazing. But we need to see more about the quality of our whole, of our walls, what is there, how it feels. No? So we have the opportunity to do it, and when it will be really scalable and make a change. So another problem that we face is this property valuation. So, and in Mexico currently, the regulatory framework is that there is not a market incentive for a house or a building that is sustainable versus one conventional. So an Ecocasa home is the same price in the market than one that is not Ecocasa. So that is discourage the market to why, because at the end they need to invest more to make it Ecocasa, or even to have this increased incremental cost, or to make it passive or any kind of measure, but it's not reflected in the value of the house. And the third one, the technical capabilities, was mentioned by Roxana at the beginning, but what we see also is that requires a high expertise of how to make it sustainable. And even I can say for Ecocasa, how we really optimize, find the best solution. There is this back and forth with the developers. So how we make it more accessible, and even has been one of the barriers for this to meet these mandatory codes for energy efficiency, where even that has been provided many manuals that are publicly available according to the bioclimatic zone, has been difficult, that always require this additional cost to hire an expert for that. And when we are talking about self-construction, or even for a low or vulnerable population, is more difficult to get those additional costs. And the fourth one, this coordination about the key stakeholders is very important. Also, it's very common that to have different players talking about the same, but are not in the same table. So how we coordinate the different efforts, and not Mexico has been mainly very innovative and really leading the market of the region, but more at national level. So how we go to the municipality, and it's something that I know WRI is working, but we need to encourage more. And also it's good that we have the private sector now interested. And the financing, even that Ecocasa is showing a model of how we can compensate this additional cost, has been also relying more in international funding. So this climate bond recognition of Ecocasa lead the opportunity for the green bonds, but it's not the only solution. Also, we saw that in Ecocasa was very common, and with this passive house, that pay for this 20% additional, mainly when we are talking about vulnerable population or social housing, is very difficult because there is a restriction of the budget where every penny counts. So that means that the government initiative really needs to support for those targets of the population, vulnerable and social. So those needs to be all the efforts coordinated with the private sector. And finally is this matrix of the energy matrix. When we're talking about net zero, is something that has been really a barrier in Mexico. Has been recently a lot of discussions about, okay, we wanted to make it net zero and mainly rely on electricity. However, the matrix in Mexico is that the energy is using fossil fuels. So sometimes it's more efficient to use gas even than electricity. And also we have the problems that if we generate more energy with the solar panels rather than what can be consumed, we cannot have an injection in the system, can be negative. So it's something important when we are talking about net zero practices, is understand the local context. So in one moment, even with this passive housing in life, that or we call in one moment Ecocasa Plus to get this 50%, and the supplying was difficult. We were making more footprint to import some of the materials that we needed, so it was a contradiction. So it's very important to get this local knowledge and what is really the supply, what is the legal and regulatory framework, and what is allowed, and will be a transition for that. I think is the final one. I will end there, and thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Patricia. I really appreciate you taking the time to emphasize both the importance of verification, not just certification, and also the subsidies, co-benefits, really centering the work that you have done and the examples that you have given from Mexico's context to send the right market signals. Also for summarizing in your last slide and illustrating the challenges to scaling so well. So really appreciate you taking the time. Well, I'd like to thank our three brilliant speakers for sharing such insightful examples and perspectives. We will now welcome them all back for a bit of a Q&A session for the next 15 minutes or so. And I see that we already have a few questions in the Q&A box. I encourage you to keep adding those. We'll go go through them for as long as we can, for as long as we have time. But I'd like to welcome back all of our speakers. Just wondering if we have Jahangir as well to join us, because I think the first question is actually more from a policy perspective, from Trivandrum and TMC's perspective as well. We've talked about affordability, especially in Patricia's presentation just now from Ecocasa's example, affordability and really targeting the most vulnerable and perhaps the informality sector as well. We wanted to ask Shri Jahangir here if, from what you've heard in the presentation here, the existing financial mechanisms, some of the subsidies and business models that have been highlighted from other countries, what is still missing? What is missing in the affordability puzzle to make it truly scalable, sustainable, and resilient decarbonized building stock in Kerala?
Yeah. So at present, actually, we are following a system which we are getting the own sources to provide the subsidies, or the government subsidies we are providing to the citizens to get the systems at their households or institutions. Like if you are going for a solar system at household, we are supporting with subsidies. And for other public transport and other government buildings, solar systems and all, we are using a government fund for procuring and maintaining O&M, including O&M. But that exact model should be that we have to bring private sector in line, and we have to promote all the stakeholders like builders and their associations to get maximum benefits from various corners to install our systems, and they have to bring robust systems for encouraging net zero carbon resilient buildings. And the government side, what we can do is as a two-side response. That one side statutorily we have to compel them, and the other side we have to bring fund sources, like we can bring financial institutions and provide maximum support through policy changes. So now we are coming up with the action plan. It is by the 10th of this month we are releasing the plan. So plan after all, it is like we are a strategic framework, like a roadmap we are preparing to, in a phase wise, we have to bring a supportive system and a mixed approach with policy and existing system, existing rules to be implemented in a good manner, so that there will be a check measure in all respect that they are implementing. Incentivization is at the other side, where the existing incentives plus wherever the possible mode we can bring maximum support to the private sector and the builders to develop. Because at present, as per the commission of our port and the recent developments in our IT sector, we are expecting huge momentum in construction sector in Trivandrum city area and agglomeration area of nearby local bodies. So we are expecting a further construction and built up area, and where we have to intervene and we have to support as well as enforce our policy systems. And collaborative governance also, we are planning, like various stakeholders, government stakeholders, especially like Kerala State Electricity Board and Energy Management Center of Kerala, local self-government department, and academia, industry, and civil society also, and community participation. It is very, very popular and very, very robust in Kerala, that we have a network of women. They are working with us for our waste management and other various efforts. Decentralization is at the peak in Kerala compared to any other states. So through grassroots level democracy or the grassroots level systems, we can bring the systems at a household level by supporting through CSR or CER or any other subsidy modes to get the households to all systems, by which I already stated that almost 5 lakhs households we have, buildings we have, at least we can phase wise provide the ensure the systems. And institutional side also, our system have lot of lacunas that we have to address the institutions institutional mechanism and the capacity building of our officials and our line agencies, so that they can bring and they can ensure maximum support to the policy and the roadmap we are formed. And all the collaboration wherever possible, the ecosystem has to be prepared, and we can maintain the same, by which that entire system of the municipal corporation is in a momentum that everybody feel that, or a confidence building, make sure that we can ensure people or by the citizens that we are in a line of supporting to implement the net zero carbon resilient building policy.
Thank you, Jagamkar. Very, very encouraging to hear, and you've really brought all stakeholders from all sectors together. We do have a question specifically to Patricia about Ecocasa and whether you have engaged with ESCOs, the energy service companies, and what your experience have been, if there have been any shared saving arrangements between the buyers and the ESCOs, or just generally how you've been approaching it. You can also refer to other existing programs from Mexico if you prefer.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. For Ecocasa, no. And why is because, so first is how we get to those specific measures that are implemented, and the energy efficiency is an internal program that is to be spread. The ideal moment is the pre-design of the, for sure, pre-building, no, the home. And after the once that is built, there are different audits that expose where we see the specific results of that. And when we find this, the main challenge of what we're doing, sometimes we're not reflected what we're expecting. No, how is the energy system in Mexico is that there cannot be a recovered part from those over production of electricity that you can inject to the system. Is the regulatory work doesn't allow that. So doesn't allow that if a homeowner has an overproduction of electricity, can sell that. No, is the regulatory framework is not currently allowing that. Also, that's why it has been one of the barriers that currently we don't have a completely net zero home in the country. There are some developers that have plans for that. Hopefully we'll have something soon, but it's one of the technical problems is how you really produce what you need and no more than that. Otherwise it's negative. However, has been some exercise about the ESCO participation, and I have the experience of one of the municipalities in Mexico that has been exploring that for build net zero buildings in their property for the municipality, and has been one of the options, but has been also one of the barriers is the regulatory framework that the same municipality has to hire an external party that can make all this investment. No, it's a work in progress. We hope to get it, but so far I cannot tell you a specific example.
Thanks, Patricia. Thank you for highlighting these options. We do have a question specifically for Atif. I see that there were a few already answered by Atif. Thank you so much. Can you walk us through green finance traceability? Specifically, the question is whether it can help inform nationally determined contribution compliance.
I would say that depends on what the NDC is about. If the NDC is about green finance, then yes, it can. But if the NDC is about something else, like building code compliance or something else, then no. So yeah, it entirely depends on the structure of that NDC that the country has put together.
Good. It depends, but potentially has that opportunity. Yeah. Great. And I have a question for all speakers, because we've been talking about affordability, we've been talking about mitigation adaptation goals, and also, the current system that we work with and the current instruments that we have been highlighted now by Atif and team and by the business models that Patricia mentioned. But we do see this tension between the long-term climate mitigation and adaptation goals that we have, that Jahimir's team has been setting up. And then at the same time, we have the short-term investor expectations. And Patricia, you walked us through one example, but is there anything we can tease out more generally that we can create a recommendation here for how we solve this tension between the long-term goals or medium to long-term goals we have for resilience in our cities and our communities, and the more short-term investor return on investment that is expected?
Yeah, maybe I can start, and because it's something that we face commonly when we mention about, and that happens in Ecocasa when I was there, no? That when we talk about the most cost efficient like measure to be implemented, then the investor or the developer was telling us, okay, when the user will recover this additional cost, and we don't have that specific tool to demonstrate. Is expected. We were working on that, but in that moment we didn't have, no? And the same with this, the example of the municipality that they wanted, okay, when I will recover my money, no? So we need to provide those tools to make the assessment when we are telling them, even to the user, for is the best way to sell that. So when I was talking about the passive house model, that they were like, okay, this is 20% more. I don't know what means a passive house. I never have the experience to be that. So we need to, the trigger to the user is to really demonstrate with numbers. You will recover your additional cost in this specific number of years, 5 years. There is it's very proof in the solar panels because it's a market that at least in Mexico has been highly developed, but it's not the solar panels the only solution. We can not only put solar panels without a proper isolation system, with the electricity system, so there is different factors, no? So we need between the technical assistance that can be really go at different levels, and not only with the national policy programs to accessible to everyone, and create those tools that really make the easy to see the numbers that you will recover your investment of those additional costs.
Yeah, from my side, I can suggest that for the time being, as a short-term measure, we can go for tax exemptions and tax benefits to attract the other people to bring net zero carbon resilient buildings, and especially commercial institutions. We can support with some speedy measures to get the license, or some other that kind of institutional mechanism which support that vendors or that business people, those who are investing in that area. And also any other mode of like CSR or CER kind of support, and wherever we can provide carbon credits, wherever we are getting carbon credits, we can mobilize and we can provide as a subsidy or promoting the system as a short-term measure. And long-term measure, of course, is a policy change needed. Exactly intervention needed from all corners of the government as well as civil society, or that we have to bring our business people also, so that there should be a level playing field for everyone to invest and to get the benefits. At present, for example, now we are going for a green building certification, where we are providing 20% tax exemption to those buildings. So sometimes like a mall, like nearby, there is a mall hereby. They are paying almost 3.6 crores rupees per year as tax, and we are providing 60 lakhs as tax benefit. This is a short-term measure that we can attract people to get green buildings immediately. And later, this will be used. They will be used for this, and they will also cooperate, and they will also ready to invest without any tax benefit, because they understood that this is good for them also. It's a win. We have to make it as a win-win for in the long term. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you both. I think that really highlights the importance of kind of quantifying the recuperation of these upfront costs, and creating the incentives on the other side in order for the upfront costs to be minimized through tax benefits or credits, carbon credits, as mentioned, really to kind of spur the demand for mainstreaming in the long term. We have a follow-up question actually, which I think ties in quite well, which is around the role of blended finance. So I think we hinted at that, you know, the de-risking possibility that municipal or national government can set up so that then the financing can flow through the IFC or the private mechanisms, possibility of setting up a blended finance platform, perhaps. I know it's something that we hear often. We have not seen one really take off, I think, internationally. So it would be really great to hear your perspectives on kind of what's holding this back.
Sorry, who was that question for?
It's an open question. Definitely would like to hear all of your perspectives if you have any insights to share.
Sure, I can talk briefly about our experience with blended finance. So yes, blended finance in theory can be a very powerful tool in mainstreaming more resilient, more green net zero buildings. But the source of blended finance is limited. That whole volume is limited. So we have to use it very strategically. The way we do it is work only on those projects that are otherwise where making a business case otherwise is difficult. One example that I can give from India, 40% of housing in India is still self-built housing, or you can say beneficiary-led construction, which is where individual homeowners are taking a small loan from a bank and then building their house themselves. Usually these are low-income families, maybe somebody who runs a repair shop or has a small-time grocery or something. So they're not very rich people. And making these homes green requires some additional effort because they are extremely budget sensitive. So helping them through blended finance is justifiable, but using that same blended finance to fund, let's say, a luxury mall or a hotel, I don't think whoever is providing that blended finance would be willing to do that. So we can do that, but in a very strategic, very limited manner to spur a market and a sector. And we've been trying to do that with affordable housing in India and other countries as well.
Thank you for that perspective, Otaif. I think it's important to target it in the right place where it's needed most, as you mentioned. So that's loud and clear. I think we'll probably pause here because there are a couple of more questions. So feel free for those panelists who are still on the line to address them. But I think we've really had a very rich discussion that centered around, I think, from affordability to resilience and, of course, how we achieve scale in the constrained system that we work in. So I want to thank Patricia, Jahangir, and Otaif again for your presentations, for your insights. We really heard loud and clear today that scaling net zero carbon and resilient buildings is a necessity, but also a really good opportunity. It makes financial sense. We just really need to find the right angles and then the right opportunities to scale. We know that buildings are continuing to be at the intersection of our biggest challenges in the future, from climate change to energy use to urbanization. We heard that loud and clear as well. But they're also some of our greatest assets and solutions. So we thank here our representatives here from progressive policies and regulations that set the clear standards and incentives, the expectations that is needed in the market. So thank you for that. We also heard from the importance of kind of de-risked financial mechanisms and the opportunity to look into innovation to build more bankable and accessible projects and also scalable opportunities in those emerging markets. And of course, we need a strong business case, as we heard, with the right collaboration and incentives to make savings viable options for all. So I want to thank again the commitment of these stakeholders that we heard from today, and we invite you all to stay engaged, to explore the resources from WRI's work through the All In for Net Zero Built Environment program, and also to be part of this growing movement to transform the built environment. So please stay in touch and join me in thanking our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.